Hello, Ayesha. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We could redo that, actually. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to cut my bit in the middle, see, just to prove I'm flexible. I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street. Today, my special guest is Ayesha Khan, the host of the simply marvellous podcast, Every Single Sci-Fi Film Ever, ***. It's won lots of prizes, it's listened to by tons and tons of people, and I'm so glad that Ayesha was able to make time to come and join me and talk about one of our favourite films, Blade Runner, or rather Blade Runner in its various forms, including all the different releases, and the sequel. Please note that we will be spoiling the film throughout the podcast, so if you've not managed to see any of the versions of Blade Runner or its sequel, I suggest you go and watch some of those beforehand and then come back and listen to the terrific podcast I was able to record with Ayesha Khan. But let's go and see what she's got to say for herself. You were very, very nice to me. You got in touch just as soon as I started publishing the podcast, and I thought that was super nice of you.
Yeah, I saw a podcast called Tipping My Fedora, and I thought that looks like a really noir icon. And I clicked on it, and I just got really excited that there was a film podcast about film noir. So yeah, I appreciate emails sent to me. So I was like, let me just send one out.
It did what it says on the tin, yes. So with that in mind, now we're going to talk about a film that I think we both really love, and which covers some of the territory in the podcast that I do and the podcast that you do, which is devoted to science fiction. But we're not talking about that just yet. Before we get to that, icebreaker question time. So, first question, what would be your definition of film noir? What do you understand that to mean for you?
I do feel, Sergio, that this is a trick question that you make everyone answer, because I don't really know exactly what film noir is, because you can't just have a sentence that's like film noir is. So to me, it is an amalgamation or a collection of traits, which include, the shadows, the mood, the lighting, tales about morality, and kind of a central character that has to deal with some kind of mystery or intrigue or a hurdle that they have to cross. And then you've got all the things that signify that it is a film noir, which is crime and gangsters and femme fatales and voiceovers. So there's all these little bits that kind of fit in to the whole thing. I remember at university we were told that the lighting was due to low budgets in the 1940s due to World War II. So I always thought that was fascinating that they took something and they just made it so beautiful. Yeah, I think it's a mixture of stuff. And I think it's interesting because my first episode of my podcast is what is science fiction? Because again, it's one of those things that you can't really define it. Everyone can have their own definition. And I think that's the same for film noir.
You are spot on. It is a total trick question. So just to get the juices flowing.
There's a guy on social media called Todd Downing, and I saw his post, which was, I finally won film noir bingo. And he's got his bingo cards that while he's watching a film, and he fills them out, and they're fascinating. So it's got stuff like motel lodge, room service, old man, shadows, femme fatale.
Okay.
Boxer, train, mistaken identity. And it's just absolutely wonderful that he's put this all together, and then he'll sit and watch it and play bingo while he's watching a film noir film. So
that's just brilliant. That. Oh, that's great. No, I'll have to put a link to that on the pages for this episode. I think that's brilliantly fun. So Todd seems to know what a film noir movie is to him. If you had to pick a movie that kind of summed up where you think this is all going, what would you pick?
Oh, that's such a difficult question. I did not watch The Third Man until last year. And after and the thing is, it's not. But after I watch a film, I sometimes get excited and I declare this is the best film ever. And I kind of did that after The Third Man, and it is such a beautiful example I want to say that ahead of Sunset Boulevard, which I probably should rewatch and probably still prefer, because it's got more of the, like you've got investigations, it's a bit more traditional noir in how I see it.
Definitely. I mean, I know what you mean. Third Man maybe has a few other things on his mind. But no, big fan of Sunset Boulevard. So, hey, how can you not love a movie narrated by a dead man? I mean, how perfectly noirish is that? So that's just sublime, I think. It's a very funny movie as well, in a kind of jet black way, which really
It's like
helps as well.
campiness as well, which is wonderful.
Yeah. But then again, it's a Hollywood story. And I think it's almost like a film noir about film noir almost. So that's kind of perfect.
It's very self-referential and kind of what they call meta now, or they used to call postmodern, where it refers within itself. It's very, when I watched that, I just couldn't believe it was made in 1950. It just felt really modern.
I know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Yeah, I know. And again, it's just so fantastic when you see a film like that and you can rewatch it. You don't get pushed back by the era or by the details of it that feel like, oh no, I push back against that now because I don't recognize that it's too remote, or because maybe the sexual politics of it, or something I don't agree, which of course is something we're going to perhaps get to talk to about the film that we're discussing today. So today we're going to talk about Blade Runner. But the reason we picked Blade Runner is because you are the host of Every Single Sci-Fi Film Ever asterisk podcast. So tell us a bit more about your podcast and that asterisk.
So I had a really rough week, and it was 2021. And I'd been doing 13-hour days because my colleague had been on holiday. And I collapsed on my bed at the end of the week. And I just lay there going, I'm supposed to love my job. I really love, producing stuff. This is supposed to be great. And I feel so tired. And I just thought, if I could do one podcast for the rest of my life, what would it be? And this very long title came to mind. Every single sci-fi film ever. When I actually got to convincing myself that the idea wasn't going to go away, I should pursue it, I thought I'd better put an asterisk on that, because there's no way I'm going to every single podcast, sci-fi film ever podcast. So that asterisk always comes with the almost, to cover my self, both morally and legally.
Yeah. So is there a film that kind of got you into science fiction as a youngster?
Well, I always like adventure stories, and I watched Star Wars as a child when it came on television. Darth Vader had a huge, impact on me, but I don't think I knew these things were science fiction. I didn't know about genre. I was a small child. I actually think it was probably in the 90s, when I was in my early to mid-teens, when I got into Star Trek Next Generation and became quite obsessed with it. And also, Terminator 2 came out around that time, and that had a huge impact on me. I remember being absolutely thrilled from the beginning. And I had seen Terminator probably way younger than I should have seen it.
Yeah.
You know what us 70s kids are like. Parents not always there. So I watched it. I really enjoyed it. But I didn't get I didn't watch any adverts or commercials or anything for Terminator 2. So I was one of the few people who watched Terminator 2 in the cinema, and that whole reveal where, Arnie is coming for John Connor, and you don't know that he's not the bad guy. You've seen Terminator. You're like, he's going to come. He's going to kill this guy. That other guy, even though watching it now, you're like, well, he's a dodgy guy too. But you think he's the one who's been sent to save him. And so that twist, everything about that just blew my mind. And it is a comfort movie. I will watch that film multiple times a year.
Well, when I saw that, I hadn't seen the first one. So I went to the cinema, saw Terminator 2, had never seen the first one. I don't know why. I just hadn't seen it. I knew the premise. I knew what it was about. So I think I got it. But also the things that I found interesting was it's actually very weird if you watch the first one afterwards, because you'll realise how similar they are. It's that classic example where it's almost less of a sequel and more of a remake. And I mentioned that because we're going to touch on some of those themes, I think, perhaps a little bit later in our podcast. But I notice in the wall right behind you is what looks like a very unusual poster for Blade Runner. Where did that come from?
This is one that I've found online, because I thought, well, I've got to I just had to decorate this wall. I'm in my, like, it's a cupboard space. It's like a storeroom. And I've kind of done it up because this is where I record. I've put like acoustic foam all over the place, and I've got a wall behind me for the video aspect. And I just wanted to put a poster up, and I've got quite a few, but I don't know. I just really liked it. I like the colouring. I love the film Blade Runner, and I thought I'd go with that one. I've got a few others, which I sometimes think maybe I'll just, play around with it. Maybe every year we'll get a new poster up there. But I do like a city, and I like a dystopian city, like visually. So yeah.
Well, obviously, to reference visual things that directly on an audio podcast is just trolling our listeners. But nonetheless, time to talk about Blade Runner. So, when did you first see Blade Runner?
So you'd hope that I would have a clear memory, considering I'm talking about it. I'm really sorry, Sergio, that I don't have a clear memory of watching it or when I watched it. I remember I must have watched it before I left home. And it would have been after I watched The Shining, because I remember watching the version which has the bits from Shining in the film. And I remember recognizing them because I watched The Shining far too young, and it had a huge impression on me. And so I was 12 when I watched The Shining. So sometime between the ages of 12 and 18. It didn't have a huge impact on me. I knew I liked it. I enjoyed the film, but it's not one of those ones like I can talk about Terminator 2 or The Shining, which blew my mind at various ages in various ways. So it's one of the films that I did go back to, though. And then I watched what was supposed to be the director's cut at some point at an IMAX cinema, which was I watched it in the front row seat because that was the only one available. And I'm never going to do that again, because it was in the day where the seats were like almost closer to the screen than, I had neck ache basically for the rest of the day.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Bad mistake. So I've watched it numerous times. I don't think I've always remembered what the difference is between the different. I know some of them, but yeah, I love a dystopia. I love the cityscapes, I think. And also I love that whole, what is it to be human, kind of, all those kind of things are just really fascinating to me.
It is a perfect fusion of science fiction and noir in a way. There are other movies that of that ilk, and an early example would be something like Soylent Green, for instance, and plenty of others. But I'm a fan of that film. But I remember I was 14 when I saw it at cinema, but I'd been reading about it in advance. I used to read a magazine called Starburst, which was actually at that time published by Marvel, and it was my first ever subscription. It was the first magazine I ever put my own money to, at which point we then moved to Italy. I'd been in the UK at the time, where I could just buy it in the shop, and then I had to get it delivered, which meant it always turned out about a month late if it arrived. But that was the film that they were excited about, because they thought, everybody loves Star Wars, but it's not serious science fiction in that sense. It's really an adventure film. It's sort of Flash Gordon brought up to date. It's marvelous. It's exciting. And until maybe Empire Strikes Back, it felt like it wasn't particularly looking in depth at certain things. But Blade Runner, it's kind of all about the texture and the depth, and also has this literary source in Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And so it has that sort of credibility, I suspect. So at the time, when science fiction was maybe still slightly ghettoized as a screen genre, and probably even as a literary genre in some ways, I think that, this is a really big budget serious film. There probably hasn't really been one like this, of this type, particularly that's a dystopia, that looks at the future since, Kubrick's 2001 or Clockwork Orange, particularly if we're talking about dystopias, I suspect. So I remember that excitement, but I was aware, looking at it from the point of view of a British magazine, that they were already talking about the fact that there'd been issues with the American cut, and that everybody seemed slightly grumpy about the version that was coming out in the cinemas in terms of people who'd made it. So you and I were having a quick chat beforehand about the kind of the different versions and how au fait do we need to be when discussing a film like this. And I just thought, well, the simplified version of that is that we've seen the versions we need to see, because the other ones are little or weird variants. So you've got the version that came out in the cinemas in 1982, and that's the version with the voiceover, and it's the version with all the scenes from The Shining at the end, all the extra footage of the helicopter shooting over Montana or whatever it is. And that's that version that we all saw for the first time.
But I believe there was an international one and an American one of those
Yes.
as well, which is, I think the
And
international
I
is
saw
more
the,
violent.
so I saw the, I would have seen the I would have seen the international version dubbed into Italian. And I have to tell you right now, Harrison Ford is way more manly in Italian. It's one of those things. It's like James Bond. It's like James Bond in Italy kind of had the same voice no matter who played the role. So it's kind of great. It always sounded exactly the same. But when Roger Moore did comedy roles, he had a different voice. He had a lighter voice. And one of the things you learn about Harrison Ford, if you're comparing the two, is that he doesn't actually have, he's now obviously quite gravelly, but doesn't have a particularly deep voice. So that one of the fun things about it is that when there's that scene in Blade Runner where he pretends to be from the Animal Protection League or whatever it is, and he does this very high pitched voice. Is that he can do that kind of nasal kind of pinched sound quite easily because his voice is actually a little bit lighter than you might think. My mum and my dad much prefer Harrison Ford in Italian because he's much deeper and more, a kind of leading manish, which is a bizarre thing to say. My mum adores Harrison Ford. Oh. She still loves watching him and stuff. And I remember watching it in Italian, and it was the extended European cut, which actually is only a few seconds. It's just a bit more violent. So there's this scene when he gets attacked by Pris, and she puts fingers up his nose and yanks. Yeah. And it lasts a bit longer in the international cut, and there's a couple of, not to get too into details, but that's the only difference.
I don't get it, Tyrell.
Commerce is our goal here at Tyrell. More human than human is our motto.
I was looking for 6 replicants in a city of 106 million people.
You ever see this girl, huh?
Never seen a Muslim.
What I didn't know was they were looking for me.
And then, we get to the 1992 version, which is the one that doesn't have a voiceover and doesn't have the finale with the scenes from outtakes from The Shining. And that's pretty much it, actually. And then you eventually get to the version that was released much, much later, which is called the Final Cut, which I'm not necessarily quite as sympathetic towards as I think other people are, just because to me it seems to be fussing around the edges a bit. I mean, maybe we'll get to that. I mean, I think it, I don't mean to be, it's fine. It sort of summarizes it, but it feels like they made some changes just because they felt they could. I'm not sure it made it better.
So the 92 version came out because they'd kind of accidentally found the footage and it got released. And by that time, so the other thing is that this film was not successful when it initially came out. There may have been excitement about it, but it did half of what it cost to make at the box office. And so they didn't think that they would need to have all these other versions. But obviously the success of it has grown so much over the years. And then I refused to watch the director's cut because I heard that sorry, the final cut. I refused to watch the final cut until Sergio. Until you said that we would be talking about this.
Oh no, it's my fault. I made you do it.
I didn't hate it, but I don't like the ambiguity being taken away from me. Like, I think the ambiguity is the point in terms of whether Deckard is or is not a replicant. And spoilers ahead. Let's just warn everyone. So the fact that they have that unicorn there at the end going, well, that there's something, I mean, we can try and say, oh, no, it could be symbolic of something else, but it's just too big a coincidence to kind of, we know the language of film. We know he's not just made a unicorn because, oops.
What are the odds?
Yeah. And I think a few people have suggested, well, it's because Rachel is unique like a unicorn. I'm like, okay, maybe. I don't know. I don't think that stands up.
There is a fun theory, which one can question, but on the extras for the Blu-ray that I have with the this version on it, the final version, Frank Darabont, the writer and director of Shawshank Redemption and The Mist and The Green Mile and lots of other things, he says, oh no, he's not a replicant. He's thinking, he's sort of fantasizing because he's awake and he's there at the piano. But he says, no, he's been told about the memory implants that Rachel has.
Rachel.
So he's sort of, in a way, he's thinking about her, and he knows that she has this in her mind, and he's associating it with this idea of a unicorn as this symbol of purity. Of course, it symbolizes all kinds of things, but this idea that almost he's connecting her with it. It's something that isn't quite real and yet somehow is sort of beautiful and sits outside of the mundane, the ordinary. And the fact is that he's read the same file that Gaff has read, and Gaff is merely saying, I was here, chum. I know she's staying at your pad, and I'm letting you off.
Yeah, no, that is kind of convincing.
It's not bad, is it? I mean, I quite like it, but that's definitely not what Scott intended it to mean.
It's weird because from what I've read, Ridley Scott wanted it to be really ambiguous, and then at some point along the last, how many years has it been? About 40 or something?
43, yeah. I'm sorry to say.
At some point he's decided, no, I'm not having ambiguity. He is definitely a replicant. So yeah, that's what Scott says.
Harrison Ford seems to have been very, very unhappy during the shoot. I think things were difficult. They were long.
Apparently a lot of people did not get along with each other during the shoot.
So it's kind of a shame, isn't it? But one of the interesting things to me about that is that there's this quote that Harrison Ford makes, again, in one of the documentaries, where he sort of says that one of the disagreements he had with Scott was about saying, we need to have one major character who isn't a replicant, because otherwise everybody is. And therefore, you need to have what I suppose you would refer to as an identification figure. I think it misses the point entirely. I mean, maybe we'll jump onto this maybe a little bit later on, but there's more to discuss there. It's not quite that binary, not quite so Aristotelian. It's not either or, and I don't think that's what gives the film its power. Otherwise, it's, let's face it, a bit reductive, really, and it's not what is so engaging. But yes, that 1992 version, which came out at the cinemas, and which was when we first got to see a version that was closer to the intentions, because it was changed in post-production. I think the way it was written, and I suppose we could do a quick plot synopsis. I mean, I didn't say we were going to do this, so I guess I could do it if you like. So, okay,
also, stop the podcast, go and watch the film, and then come back.
Yes, you're so right. We will wait for you, right? I mean, it's okay.
We're not going anywhere.
No,
we'll just be paused here in your pocket. Don't worry.
See you in a couple of hours. It's set in the distant past, future.
Future.
In the future, you're so right. Of 2019, as it was in 1982, and it's a very 1980s movie. Of course, it's got all that product placement, partly for companies that no longer exist. So that's one of the fun things for me. But it imagines a dystopia in which, either through pollution or other problems, people have moved off-world to a large extent. And therefore, you have the dregs of humanity that have been left in the big cities, crowded, full of congestion, over-pollution. There's not enough of anything. And most animal life seems to have died out. So that they make, how do we refer to it? I don't know. Because androids always seems like it should be people. Yeah. But
electric is fine, because the title of the source material has electric sheep, and we're introduced to an electric owl quite early on in the film.
We should say, so it's an adaptation of this book that was published in the late 1960s by Philip K. Dick. And it follows the outline of the book up to a point, I think. Most people tend to sort of say, well, it's not that close. I think it's actually reasonably close. In essence, it's a kind of detective story where the protagonist is Rick Deckard, and he is sent out to deal with these androids, or in the novel Andes, who have been built so that they can work off-world, doing kind of slave labor type work, in essence, heavy lifting. But they're developing their own thoughts and they don't want to be slaves. So there have been attacks and mutinies and whatnot, and some of them have come back to Earth for reasons that are not entirely clear. Deckard is sent out basically to kill them off. So it's sort of, the idea is that because they're artificial, it's not murder. In the film, there's this rather nice line right at the beginning where it says this was considered retirement. Well, do you want to talk about that? Because you recently reread it, is that right?
Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to talk to Sergio. I can't be a complete thicko on his show. It'll be embarrassing for myself and my mum. So I went and read the book, and I absolutely. So I love science fiction film, as you can probably guess. I'm not a big science fiction book reader, so I've started reading a lot more because I'm researching these films and I'm kind of getting into it a bit more. But Philip K. Dick's book blew my little mind. Like I knew the film and the story and the plot was great, but it goes into more depth. It has more themes. It's a phenomenal story. Certain bits of it, just from a literary perspective, I mean, he wrote this in the late 60s and he went on to write so many more books, and he is such a well-known and accomplished writer. There's so much good stuff in there, so I can forgive the little kind of things where he's like, somebody said this and he thought that, like, there's slightly tiny bits in there where you think it reminds you you're reading a book, but apart from that, it's an exciting, fast-paced, intricate, amazing book. Like it has all the themes that are in the film and more, although it clarifies certain things which I think the film either changes or doesn't clarify, and one of those is whether Deckard is a replicant or not.
So in the book, he has to go out and find these what in the film become replicants, and then it's a question of exploring your own sense of humanity, which is one of the things that I think the book and the film properly share, I think, because the book seems to look in lots of different ways at ways of exploring what is real. I mean, it's a book that has amazing number of themes in it, after all. I mean, it's, post-humanism, existentialism, free will versus determinism. I've got a list. I mean, mechanization, pollution, my favorite, thanatophobia, which is death fear, slavery, social Darwinism, and let's face it, animal husbandry. They all get in there somehow. And in the book, it seems to me, you've got Deckard, who's a kind of a figure that you see in a lot of Philip K. Dick books, which is that he's a working stiff. And you get a lot of information about what the day-to-day life of the office drone is like, in a way. And he's married, not especially happily. And they have this sheep on the roof of the house where they live, right?
And so I think that's actually one of the core central themes. And I realize that it's to do with empathy and how we feel about androids and how we feel about animals. But I think that theme, that's truly examined far deeper in the book compared to the film. And I actually think, so I read it, I've probably twice in my life read a book in one sitting, but this is one of them. I just thought it was phenomenal because there's the Voight-Kampff test, which is supposed to test your empathy. And the whole idea of people having these animals in the book is so it can test their empathy. If you have an animal, obviously you care enough and you are empathetic, and therefore you are human. And in the end, the book is like a Voight-Kampff test, because in the book, spoiler alert, at the end, the androids find a spider and they are like, oh, look at this spider. Let's pull its legs off and see what it will do. And up until that point, I have been with these androids. I'm like, rise up, get your freedom. You do not deserve to be slaves, right? You're with them. And then they torture this spider. And like that, like in an instant, my empathy for them as like sentient being just vanishes. And it's so interesting that the book does this. When that, it talks about the Voight-Kampff test, you don't know what it is. It's such a clever way of, the book is the empathy test. It's very clever.
And one of the aspects of the book that didn't translate at all into the film is mercerism, isn't it? This kind of religious or empathetic religion, I should say. So it's this idea that you can fuse with this person called Mercer and you share your ups and your downs in your life, and you kind of exchange them almost. So it's kind of like a group of people can get together You have these things called an empathy box, and by channeling into this box, and that's where the book came from. There was a short story where that first appeared. The idea is that you can either relieve yourself of certain anxieties. That's the idea. But in actual fact, it's more complicated than that, because the idea is that if you're feeling particularly good, you're actually going to feel a bit less good because you've given some of that to other people. And equally, if you're feeling especially bad, you're going to sort of share that and maybe feel a little bit better. It's a little bit, it's typically complicated in Philip K. Dick and open. You never feel he's ambivalent about anything, but he's ambiguous about nearly everything. And
I quite like that.
Yeah, and then eventually, because the whole book is about reality versus artificiality and what is human and what is not human, ultimately even Mercer is revealed to be an actor. And he says, yes, I made these videos years ago, but it's all a sham. And yet, in actual fact, it works and people don't give up on it, because the idea is it's still a sort of index of your own humanity. Being able to empathize is so important. And so to have a system, a belief system, no matter where it comes from, if it is successful, if it works for you. And that's quite modern. I think the idea that if it's good for you, why not? Go for it.
The science fiction and noir kind of crossover. The reason it works is I think noir's always accepted society as a dystopia to some degree. And so when science fiction's talking about futuristic dystopias, it just works because noirs, even when they were set, and it's in the modern time, it treats society as this kind of dystopia of its own. But yeah, I think it's really interesting because it's that buying into stuff. You get in the book, you get these people who are on the radio, and then you get this guy who's fake, and he's supposed to be Mercer, and it's these people who are almost addicted to these machines, these devices, because it connects them to other people, but through a very artificial way. And that's kind of, I mean, that's so indicative of today, right? Like we communicate with people on our phones now, but nobody answers their phone. You don't want to actually speak to another human being. Like that's how it works. And it's interesting that cyberpunk thing, it's a long time ago, but it really captures that kind of essence of, we increasingly in cities especially live in more isolated communities. And often most people don't have communities. There's often loneliness epidemics everywhere, especially in big cities. And the way we overcome that is either by going online or by going on our phones or connecting with people who aren't people that we know. So yeah, the Mercer box is a great invention and speaks a lot to this whole cyberpunk thing.
Yeah, I think it is terrific. And I don't know if I miss it, because I think one of the oddities about the film is that it's the genre hybrid and works, I think, quite successfully on that basis. It's both sort of retro noir, because some of the stylings are very 1940s. Some of the clothes and hairstyles that Rachel, is played by Sean Young, definitely recall sort of Joan Crawford, say, from the 1940s, films like Mildred Pierce. Certainly in the original version, where you have the voiceover, the narration, that's very associated with the kind of hardboard literature of particularly someone like Raymond Chandler, who I'm a huge fan of.
New climate, recreational facility.
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession. Ex-cop, ex-Blade Runner, ex-killer.
Use your new friend as a personal...
Also, you get the kind of lighting style, which is that expressionistic lighting style where you get sort of slatted lines of light that come in and bisect images to suggest a level of drama and instability. But also the big climax of the film, which is set in the Bradbury building, which even housed Philip Marlowe's office in the 1969 film Marlowe. So it has all these kind of connections. At the same time, one has to accept that it's not particularly good in terms of its science, I don't think, because the whole Voight Kampf aspect of it in the film makes no sense at all, particularly in the plot, because in the plot, Rick Deckard has left. He doesn't, I mean, in the film, he's not married, although in some of the alternative audios for the narration, the various takes. There are versions where his wife has just left him, and that sort of gives an idea that he's sort of left his job because of that. But anyway, that got excised, even in the version with the narration. But he's somewhat at a loose end. He's not working. He's looking for work. He used to be basically a cop and would retire these replicants, and he doesn't want to do it anymore. That's kind of the important bit. He's starting to feel very detached from that and thinking it isn't clear cut. It isn't black and white. To just say, oh, they're not human, it's all right, is something he's really not comfortable with, which makes us like him more. Instead, he gets called back because he's told, no, you're the best. And we did assign somebody else to try and get the...
You're the second best, but that person's dead now.
Yes. Although in one of the extended versions of the pre versions of the film, it turns out he's stuck in a box somewhere. He actually survived, but he's going to be stuck in this kind of cocoon for the rest of his life.
Oh my gosh.
There's a scene where he actually talks to that guy. This is the work print version. We're not going to talk about that. But that was an early edit. That did in fact get released by mistake, I think, almost. But anyway, he's shown video of the replicants they're looking for. Why do you have to run a Voight-Kampff test? You just need a photograph. And he says, oh yeah, it's you. You're under arrest. He says, no. He runs 10 minutes, spends doing some Voight-Kampff test, doesn't notice that he's got a gun on him. So I don't know what kind of security they're running in this organisation. And he just blows him away. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's just daft. And again, why does Deckard spend forever when he meets Zora? Fantastic performance by Joanna Cassidy, who appeared in several genuine neo-noir films from the 70s, films like The Outfit, and a terrific actress. And later in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is a fantastic noir film. He doesn't just arrest her. He knows it's her. He's got her photo. It's not like he has to figure it out. It makes no sense.
Is it partially because these replicants aren't supposed... Well, no, you could arrest them for something else, couldn't you? Because they're not supposed to have these replicants on Earth. They're not supposed to show people that people... Because they're selling this whole get off world, it's going to be great. They don't want to show people coming back to Earth because they don't like the conditions, whether they're replicant or not. So, yeah, no, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, it's from the book, isn't it? In the book, it's quite clear that off-world is actually pretty horrible. And they're kind of lying to the people who are going off-world. I mean, in the book, it's more complicated, isn't it? We don't get it in the film. It's this idea that you've got two types of people who are still on Earth. And they're either sort of regular people who can, in fact, travel if they want to, and others who have got radiation poisoning or got other issues. And so
pass the health check, so to speak.
Yeah, so they can't. And obviously we get that with the Sebastian character because he's got this which we get to a bit later on. That aspect of it, like several other aspects of the film, are highly illogical, but at an emotional level you connect with the idea of it because you're sort of thinking this idea that you go and test, you have a electronic or you have a scientific test to figure out if you're human or if you're human enough, and that's very appealing. I think that's very strong meat. And you're thinking, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. I mean, you could argue, why is it that in this version of 2019, they don't seem to have air conditioning? Why have they always got ceiling fans? Well, it's because they look cooler. Yeah. It's the only reason. So much of it is about the look and the feel and the idea of it. I think that if one were being critical, you could argue that the film stumbles a bit on follow through, which is, I think, something that can be said about a lot of Ridley Scott films.
And I think it's a part of police procedure. They got to do the Voight-Kampff test, and it then gives her the opportunity to say, have you ever sat one of these tests, Deckard? And have you ever retired a human? Because I mean, it shows that they are infallible, and that again. More of that theme goes on in the book. Like, these are not perfect things. And the only other way, well, in the book, the only other way they can tell is by a bone marrow kind of test, which is fascinating because it means that everything else is as human as possible. An X-ray is not going to do it. Nothing, like, they are very human. But
why would you do that? What would be the point of creating androids that you can't separate from reality? You're just thinking...
Because your motto as the Tyrell Corporation Sergio, is more human than human.
I forgot. You're absolutely right. But of course, if they just made them blue, this would not have been an issue. I mean, sure, you would have had the Blue Man players turn up, but, never mind. So, but yes, that scene, of course, which is taken fairly closely from the book, actually, where Deckard first meets Rachel. And he sort of said, "Oh, why I want you to do a negative test before you do a positive test."
Yeah.
That's from the film. But it's the idea of, and then they try and fake Deckard out. They try and say, "Well, there you are. You see, your system says that she is a replicant, but actually she isn't." And which again is a bit convoluted in the book. The machinations behind that are kind of wearying a little bit. Those are the sort of things that I can live without, because it makes you question absolutely everything in the book. Nothing is real. Nobody's telling the truth. In the film, you could argue that it's taking the more conventional route by establishing a strong connection between the male and female leads of the film. So it almost becomes a kind of dating scene. It's almost like a meet cute, because the idea is that he has to ask her over 100 questions before
rather
he
than
can...
the usual 30 or whatever.
Yeah, and so you're thinking this has probably taken about an hour. So by the end of that, he knows quite a lot about her, and then the implication is he gets to see her file anyway. She knows a bit more about him, and it's very nicely played as well. I think that the kind of questions she gives back at him, which are, they're kind of along the lines of almost 1940s kind of witty banter almost. And I quite like that. I think that works in terms of, again, meshing the
retro vintage, retrofitting thing.
And I think that works quite well. And then we get these important scenes, I think, where Deckard's own empathy for her, he feels sorry because she comes to him and sort of says, so Tyrell won't see me now. He won't tell me why. I don't know why he told you what he told you about me, but it isn't true. And he sort of says, okay, yeah, sure, bad joke. I didn't mean it. Because he feels bad for her.
Because she's crying.
Yeah.
And emotion.
And he feels bad for her. And also because he genuinely seems taken aback, because he starts off being the kind of the hardball guy. He says, look, hey, it's not my fault. You are what you are. I'm not saying anything about you. And he's quite clear at the beginning of that scene, of course, the earlier scene, where he sort of says, you're either a positive thing or you're a negative thing. And if you're a positive thing, it's got nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with my job. That's fair enough. He has a kind of laid back attitude to that, which is actually quite important. He's not a zealot. He's not going around saying all skin jobs have to die. Skin job being quite a well-judged, nasty epithet. I think you hear it, you're thinking, no, it's not nice, and it doesn't mean anything. But
kind of gross, yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of way. So I think that's well. And then you get a later scene where he literally sort of rings her up and sort of says, do you want to meet me for a drink? It's like he's asking her out for a date, which is sort of important in terms of the development of the story.
I just want to quickly mention about when he's at Tyrell's office and he says, how can she not know what she is? And that, again, when you're watching as someone who watches a lot of films, you're like, you start suspecting Deckard. Like, he's been asked whether he's ever taken the test. He's been asked if he's ever retired human. And then he's like, how can she not know what she is? And so you're like, well, I mean, now that the lore of the films is that he is a replicant, he doesn't know that. It'd be interesting to know when he was switched on and what memories of his are fake. But go back to, yes, she refuses to join him at Zora's club.
She's upset. And she's still upset about the whole thing. She's not upset with him, but she's upset about the whole situation, and he feels bad. So in terms of the traditional reading of this kind of story, we're kind of getting a sense that they're getting to know each other, but at the same time there's a undercurrent of sadness and regret and quite complicated issues. And by the way, I should say up front, I don't necessarily buy the whole he's a replicant thing anyway. So in terms of how certainly in the first cut of the film, he isn't. I don't care what anybody says. It's quite clear he's not supposed to be. The confusion, important as that is, sets in later, because surely it's about how you index your humanity. How do you, what are the tokens that you have to use to establish that? And so this has a strong kind of allegorical feel to it, and I think it works quite well. But if you were getting literal about it in terms of the film, because it's vague on certain things, you can only go by what you see. The film is different from the book in one interesting respect, which is that Pris, who's played by Daryl Hannah in the film, in the book, she is identical to Rachel. Which makes life a bit more complicated. And I'm thinking, oh, so there's just a whole bunch of Rachels out there. So it's kind of like, which brings it into a kind of...
There's no unicorn in the book either.
No. So you start to worry, oh dear, it's going to be like a Ken and Barbie type situation where, because that, it's something I suppose we'll get into with this idea of the modern idea of a plastic human and what that's for exactly. And it's kind of like the whole fembot thing. I mean, okay. We don't have to delve too deeply into that one. But
sure one hell of a history behind that, yes.
So we've got to this point in the film where he's tracking them down and he's doing what he needs to do unwillingly. He's been dragged back. He's being made to do it. Then we get this sad, very dramatic scene because when he finds Zora and ultimately, she runs. She won't stop. She tries to beat him. She tries to kill him and unsuccessfully. He sort of survives. She gets interrupted, so she decides to flee and he chases her, and you get one of the very few kind of chase type scenes in the film. And then we get this dramatic sequence where he does shoot her and she ends up going through all these plates of glass.
With the mannequins on either side as well.
Yeah, which is a very interesting idea. And then she lands on top of all these shards of glass. And you get all these reflections of her as well. That, of course, is one of the scenes that got tweaked in the final edit because the stunt person who was doubling for Joanna Cassidy didn't look that much like her. And also they put this kind of wig on her that didn't look anything like Joanna Cassidy's own hair. So, and I must admit, at the time when I watched it, I mean this in 1982, it was pretty obvious even to 14-year-old me that, that's not Joanna Cassidy, So it's been tweaked digitally so that now her face has been digitally altered to include Cassidy's features. And so in that sense, it's smoother. But it's a very dramatic moment because the tone of it, the way it's done, it's not an exciting scene. After all, it's important that the music, it's in slow motion. It has maybe a bit of a Sam Peckinpah feel to it, but it's very conflicting because Deckard is not at all happy about it. And you contrast that, of course, with when his boss turns up and tells him what a great job he's doing. He's jubilant. Oh, you killed one of the replicants. Fantastic. Deckard doesn't feel, he's not smiling. He's very... And then immediately after that, one of the other replicants turns up because, of course...
But also his boss says to him, oh, there's 4 more out there. And he's like, no, 3. And he doesn't want to shoot an extra person.
And of course it's Rachel.
Person. It's Rachel.
And by that point, so that's where the story really pivots, isn't it? Because at that point, because of course there is this confusion about the number of replicants, depending on which version of the film you watch, because there was basically an editing error. So the numbers of replicants never actually added up. It was really strange. In one version, he says there's 4, there's 5. There were 6 of them. 1 got killed, so there should be 5 left, but they're only looking for 4. And that was one of the things that's been tidied up in this final cut. Nice. Just in a little bit of audio. Yeah, exactly. It's very nerdy. Frankly, I mean, we get it. It's just an error in between sequences. But at that moment, he really doesn't want to do it. And now he's been told that Rachel's been added to the list because she's left Tyrell. And she's just, she's not going back. So she's, as it were, on the run. Quite why she therefore needs to be knocked off is not entirely clear, frankly, but okay.
I think the idea is that you can't have free roaming replicants. They are enslaved to humans, whether off-world or at the Tyrell Corporation. You can't have them free roaming in society.
Yeah.
Just can't have it.
I mean, the ones that we're looking for in the film, as it were, so led by Roy Batty, again, character from the book, played wonderfully by Rutger Hauer, the late great Rutger Hauer, who is a wonderful presence in the film. It's quite clear that these, which are sort of, I suppose, worker replicants, they have greatly augmented strength. Apart from anything else, we sort of see that proved over and over again.
And especially with the male models are kind of, for heavy lifting and combat. But even the female ones, Priz is a basic pleasure model.
Yes.
And
but Zora's a combat person, isn't
yeah.
she? So
they're enhanced.
I mean, I think Joanna Cassidy could beat the tar out of the pair of us. Actually, I'm fairly sure. She's awesome. If you haven't seen her in Under Fire, you should. It's a really problematic movie, but she's so good in that. One of the other replicants turns up, the one who killed Deckard's.
Is that Leon?
It's Leon, yeah, and played by another late Brian James.
And then he says, "How long am I going to live?"
Yes.
And then he's like, "Well, longer than you," because he's trying to kill him. He's about to shoot him.
But yes, we have learned that they have. We know what their incept date is, but they've been given a termination date. Yeah, so it's 4 years.
And that's a quite central part of the film. This is what they want. Just, they want to live.
I mean, it's kind of a noir idea, that kind of fatalistic idea that you don't have long left. So in a traditional noir film from the 40s and 50s, it would be because you're on death row. Or if you've seen DOA, it's because you've been given a nasty toxin and it's going to kill you within X number of hours. But this idea that you've got a clock running is very, very typical of those kinds of films. And one of the best, in fact, is called The Big Clock. And so it's a great scene. It's also an action scene. It's a sort of violent tussle scene. And he's just about to kill Deckard. And all of a sudden, bang, because Rachel, who has been looking in on him, has picked up his gun and killed the other guy. At which point, things get very, very unusual in the film. And I did want to talk to you about this because one of the things that when we were discussing this sequence in the film, which, let's put it this way, may not have aged very well, is did you want to?
Yeah, I feel like you're getting really awkward. So do you want me to jump in for this stuff?
Go on.
Let's just call it the representation of women, shall we?
All right then.
So I think a lot of people, and the thing is, I watched this earlier last year, probably the original, one of the original versions, and I'd actually completely forgotten about this. That there is a point where Deckard pretty much rapes Rachel. And we can say pretty much just to try and kind of make ourselves feel better, because the way I deal with it is I'm going to just try and ignore it. But she tries to leave his house. He physically prevents her from doing so. He pushes her back, and then he tells her what to tell him in terms of what he wants from her and what he wants her to say. And she is intimidated and scared. And that is the sex scene or the rape scene of the film. And the thing is, we could go into examining it, but sadly, I think it's just one of those things which is of its time. I don't think it was meant to be a rape scene. I don't think it's something that was meant to be like, oh, well, Deckard kills replicants and he also rapes them. These replicants, Priz is a pleasure model. They aren't considered human. So yeah, we can kind of take it from that angle, but I actually think the unfortunate truth is that it wasn't considered that bad back then. I don't think it was really talked about back then. I don't think the literature you're going to find about this film in the 1980s is going to discuss it. I mean, I've got a book here, which, thank you so much, Scott Buchatman, who has written the BFI Classic on this, which I've been reading. Doesn't mention it at all. It's only been mentioned more recently, and that's because I think society, thankfully, has moved on so far. But I don't think it's done on purpose. I don't think it is around the concept of slavery or consent or, all those interesting things, because even though I heard someone online say, it's because we're trying to show Deckard as, a morally flawed person, but there's morally flawed and then there's rape, it's not like it's quite it's a big thing. It's actually quite a tragedy, as in the arc of Rachel and women here, the main women here are all replicants. They don't have much personalities of their own. And it is a shame because Ridley Scott did Alien just few years earlier, which completely changed gender in film. But I think she's betrayed by Tyrell, who she believes is her father. And then she gets raped by Deckard. And then she goes from being this icy femme fatale to becoming a completely lost, compliant, unquestioning woman who turns to him to save her. And it's like that's actually a really tragic fall from femme fatale to damsel in distress, docile. It's just really tragic. It's really tragic. If she was the protagonist, it would be extremely tragic.
I mean, yes, certainly in terms of the way it's presented in the film, I think you're supposed to get some kind of development. It's a weird moment in the film, of course. They both just killed a replicant at that point in the film. But yes, I mean, in terms of how you were meant to receive it then, the music is telling us it's a romantic scene. And I don't know if that was meant to suggest some kind of awkwardness because she's a replicant, maybe, and he isn't, and he's saying, I don't care anymore, but it's sort of weird. I agree, it feels odd. I think it always felt slightly odd at the time. It's actually a very brief scene. That's one of the surprising things about it. It was in that sense, because you remember it, and it's almost a bit too compressed, because it's almost like you don't get enough Rachel in it. You don't get enough of her point of view. You know, if it's one of those things, you know, if you were trying to sort of develop it in a stronger way. But I do like Sean Young in the film. I think she's actually very good in it, and it was a fairly early role for her. But I think she works extremely well. I really like that scene with the two of them at the piano, for instance. You know, as part of the sort of, let's call it the romantic build-up, if you like, as they get closer. I think all that side of it is done very, very nicely, and I think is. But it's one of the things about the film that I think is occasionally problematic, actually, is that the certain through lines aren't worked all the way through. It feels a bit stop-start sometimes. It feels a bit lumpy, both in terms of narrative, in terms of story, but also in terms of, let's call it character development, if you like. There are some things are just thin.
Rachel in the book is part of the resistance. So that's the thing. They take away her own autonomy over that, and she becomes a figure that is, we see her in relation to Deckard. So before, she's privileged daughter of a huge magnate who owns Tyrell Corporation, and then she goes to being like this, you know, she's broken down as an individual, whereas in the book she is part of the resistance. And so if you have someone like Roy Batty, who is, you know, he's upset about having 4 years. He's upset about being enslaved. He's developing these feelings. And that's the other thing that people have suggested, that after 4 years, they start developing feelings, and that's why they are retired by then. Admittedly, we're not really sure about that, because although it's mentioned in the film, it's also when he goes to Tyrell and he says, you know, Father, I want to live, or whatever his exact lines are. He's like, well, we've tried to extend it. So I don't know if, like you said, it doesn't always make sense. Did they try and extend it, or did they put it in so that they couldn't live longer? Is he lying to him? We don't know. So Rachel has no resistance to being enslaved. And then Zora, who does have some resistance. In the book, I think it's Luba Loft, who is the Zora equivalent. And it's really beautiful because it talks about creativity. And I think one of the things that humans value about ourselves as a species is the concept of art and creativity. And in the book, she's an opera singer, and she does so well. And Deckard goes to the opera and he is deeply moved by her, whereas in the film she does some kind of, you know, erotic dance with a snake, which we don't actually get to see. But again, it makes it like, you know, okay, I'm sure the dance was amazing and everything, but it's very much that pleasure model level of what this replicant it can do. So, you know, lifting a replicant to be able to partake in or be creative would then call up those questions of humanity. What is human? What's android? You know, like sentience and all those kind of things. So I think it's a shame, and I understand it's you know, you can't make a 7-hour film, but those choices are interesting after he made Alien.
It's also a trope, a film noir trope. You know, it's kind of the exotic dancer, if you like. I mean, but again, as you say, it doesn't make a lot of sense anyway. So she's just come back to Earth so she can be an exotic dancer? Is that it? That's how she's going to live out the rest of her life. It's unclear, right? And she's not going to get to Tyrell by doing that. So this seems very again. It's just it gives it visual variety. I think the fact that you don't even see the dance ultimately means that it just means Pris gets to be a certain kind of person, she gets to be a certain kind of person, and they're just different. And it's visual texture, visual pleasure, if you like, if we're going to use the kind of Laura Mulvey type turn. And I think that that's completely reasonable. But this is what I mean about the film, because I think all the positive things we can say about the film in terms of taking the subject seriously and dealing with a very fundamentally downbeat subject, which, and certainly in the later cuts, doesn't try to sort of squeeze out of by having a happy coda. And it does have a kind of brutal element to it. It does suggest that humanity is just on the slide, so that it's infinitesimal degrees is how you determine people's humanity, because most people are not very nice in this. The replicants are not heroes, as you say. In the book, they do horrible things to spiders. In the film, we're told that they've killed dozens of people. And in that sense, they're not like freedom fighters. They just want to live a bit longer. But yes, so they can do more exotic dancing. There has to be more to it, and we don't get access to it. We don't get it. It's, in a way, it's not thought through, because the idea is enough for it to be stimulating for you to have a conversation and thought in your head about, but it's not what you actually see in the film. There's enough there to explore, what's Roy Batty going to do with the rest of his life? Okay, he gets to live another 10 years, 20 years. We don't know how long we're going to live, if you're lucky. So what's that actually about? And we don't know. Does he have ambitions? We don't know what they are. He just doesn't like being pushed into a corner, and he doesn't like the life that he has, because it's pretty horrible. They've all got kind of horrible lives in this film. I mean, that's the truth of it. I mean, I think that it's sympathetic and a bit empathetic, and yet at the same time, it's lacking in any kind of hope, isn't it? I mean, it's a very downbeat dystopia. I mean, in a way, why did they think that spending $28 million on a film like this was a good idea? I mean, they were surprised it didn't make a lot of money at the box office. I can't think of any big dystopian films of that type that up to that point had made any kind of real money. And there's only a couple since that and that's because they're done as big star vehicles. And I'm thinking of things like I Am Legend with Will Smith, as opposed to the version with Charlton Heston, which was The Omega Man, which was not a big hit either. It did okay, but of course they're inherently very depressing.
I think our tastes have changed, though. Like something like Blade Runner. I mean, oh my gosh, that first scene when you look down on the city and it's got those flames coming up, and the special effects are phenomenal. So when I said I got the final cut, and I watched it on my laptop because it's connected to my Apple TV, and I was like, and also it was nice because I had my headphones on. The sound design is phenomenal, and it is a spectacle. I mean, science fiction is about spectacle. It is a visual delight to watch, and yes, it's downbeat, but then I think sci-fi fans and maybe even noir fans are kind of used to that. Like we like a bit of a downbeat story. No,
it's just not very commercial. I mean, that's why I'm always surprised that people talk about the fact. I mean, obviously it's made pots of money in other ways. I mean, on video, it's been how many? I mean, I bought it on VHS, on Laserdisc, on DVD, on Blu-ray, and so have lots of other people. It's made a truckload of money. Forget all the TV plays and cable and all these other sorts of things. So it's done very well. So they can't complain. But this idea that this was somehow a commercial proposition always seems utterly bizarre, because the constituency that would have gone to see this film as a serious, very dark film, in a way, it's a film that comes out in the 80s, but it's really kind of a 70s film. It seems to me that you look at it in terms of the kind of despairing tone of these brilliant films that came out in the 1970s, not to exaggerate the whole, the 1970s was an amazing moment, but it was this gigantic shift from studio filmmaking of the 60s, that's for sure. And so you get these very downbeat, even noir films, say something like Chinatown, for instance, or The Conversation. Extraordinary films in their own way.
Cynicism that I think like the world had changed. It's interesting actually because I recently did an episode on the invasion of the body snatchers and the differences between the 1956 version and then the
78 or whatever, yeah.
And it is like, it's such a darker film, and it is more cynical, and it is more brutal, and it does not care about your feelings.
I know, and I'm such a wuss. I mean, I way prefer the 1950s version, just to be completely clear. I know some people adore the remake from the 70s, and obviously there have been several more since. I think the one from the 50s is the only one that really works, because I think it feels like a McCarthy era film, and it's kind of, no, we're talking about the commies or not, but it's exploring that idea, and it's a particular time and place. Whereas, as you say, the one from the 70s, it's very 70s. It's very bleak. It's very kind of unmoored from this idea of civilization will persevere. Although, again, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, classic example in the 1956 version of one where the ending was changed to make it less bleak. And so that's what happened with the 1982 version of Blade Runner, which Scott, I mean, he shot those scenes at the end. It wasn't taken out of his hands in that sense. The bit that he didn't have control of was the narration, because that was done afterwards. He was in the UK doing, I think, second unit stuff, including shooting the unicorn bit, which didn't get used for a decade. But the voiceover was done in Hollywood, and Scott wasn't there, and I just don't think it's very good. I actually miss the voiceover in the sense that I think voiceover could have worked, because one of the things that is very clear to me is that when you compare the version with the voiceover with one without, is that the pace is much, much slower. And in the original script, there was voiceover, and they kind of and ahed about it, whether it would be there. But it wasn't, whatever the voiceover was going to be, it wasn't. None of them were happy with the one it ended up with, and I agree. I don't like the voiceover.
Yeah, I'm quite fond of a voiceover. Like I like it in film noir. I love it in film noir. I like it in Scorsese's films. I'm not someone who's like, no, show don't tell. I'm like, no, you can tell me. But I don't think the voiceover works in this. And I think the biggest part of that is when I watched the final cut, I didn't miss it for a second.
You know what it is as well, is that I did find it. I'd forgotten how violent the film is. It was interesting. I'd forgotten just how nasty some of the detail is. Things like, nails through his palm.
Oh, yeah.
End. Horrible details like that.
His death scene, where she's just like, It
is a violent film. And again, it feels more 70s than 80s in that respect. And again, it's not something that particularly draws me in film. So it certainly is an edgy experience. So you get these beautiful visuals and extraordinary special effects, magnificent musical score, charismatic leads in the roles, but at the same time, a lot of the detail is very brutal. But you get, even if you accept that the out in the countryside ending was not a good idea, and so you get the much more brutal ending, which is the one we first got in 1992, which was find the unicorn, we've discussed whether that means he's a replicant or not. I choose to think he probably isn't.
I choose for it to remain ambiguous because I like it that way.
Well, exactly. And then they get in the lift, the doors close. Done. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I remember I went there with the entire family. Mum, Dad, my brother, we all went to see it. The Odeon Covent Garden. I still remember where we were. That was 33 years ago. And that was amazing gut punch. And it really worked. Because in terms of the emotional sense of the film, it really, really works, I think. So it's a much better ending. But it is a hard ending. I mean, it's a hard cut. It's slam.
And when Rachel asks him earlier in the film, like, if I went to the north, if I just went away, would you chase me? And he says no, because I owe you one, because she's just saved his life. But then he said, but somebody will. And so when those doors close, okay, Gaff has given him leeway to say, I'm not going to be that guy chasing you, but somebody will. If there's a replicant on the loose and they're not dead, there is going to be another Blade Runner out there who's, in theory, going to follow them.
I think at this point we have to talk about the sequel.
You're a cop. I did your job once. I was good at it.
I know.
What do you want?
I want to ask you some questions.
You've had a kind of road to Damascus conversion about the sequel. Tell me more, because I remain unconvinced. I'll tell you up front, I rewatched it just 3-4 days ago, and I am sorry to say that I have not matured in my feelings about the film at all. 8 years have passed, and I haven't changed my mind. I still find it full of good ideas, but the beginning's too slow, the ending's too short, and the middle bit in Las Vegas is the best bit. So, what do you think?
So I went to the cinema. I loved it. And I was like, oh, that's a great film. I was like, but it's not like the original, right? Like, and this is because I haven't seen the original for years. I've got like, my concept of it is like, it's one of the best science fiction films. So of course this new film is visually, and I will never pronounce his name right, so I'm going to try. Denis Villeneuve.
Sounds good.
Is just, his films just grab my soul and shake them when he, like, visually and everything about it. I love the Dune films. I love so much of the stuff that he's done. And so I love the film. And then I've watched it again. And then I watched it just like I told you, like a few weeks ago in preparation for this. And that was after I ended up watching, so I watched Blade Runner last year, and then I watched the longer version a while ago. So then I can compare the two, and I'm like, I don't actually want to say it. I want to be like you, Sergio. I think I really, really do prefer the sequel. And now I'm saying it publicly.
Out for the whole world to know. So, okay, what is it you prefer about it?
Okay, so first of all, I am a sucker for visual delights of cinema. When I go to the cinema, you show me good cinematography, lighting, colouring, stuff like that. I am an absolute sucker for it. So first of all, yes, I've just absolutely talked about the original being a phenomenal visual delight, which it is. I think the sequel takes it further. And I think that is Villeneuve's kind of like, he just, all of his films, every single time I watch one of his films, I'm just like blown away with the way he and his cinematographers, the way they treat the frame and the way they film everything. I think it's interesting that we now progress to the point that the Blade Runners know that they're replicants and they're going out and doing those things. And the first scene, I mean, did you say it was slow, the scene where he goes...
Oh, listen, you probably don't want to get me started. I have quite strong opinions about it, which are completely different from yours. Yeah. So that's why I'm really curious to know what you think.
I think a lot of people say this. So I've had someone come in and go, it was boring. And then I was like, I've never found it boring. And then they said something else. And then no, they were like, you should watch better films. And I was like, I'm going to block you. I don't need to do it.
They didn't say that, did they? Oh my God. Oh.
I don't mind having a conversation about, what you dislike or like about the film, but please don't insult what kind of films I watch. I think visually it's stunning. And then we've moved on so that we're not questioning whether Ryan Gosling's character is a replicant. We know he's a replicant from the start. And then it goes into similar themes, but I think they've progressed because now it's not talking about what is humanity. It is literally just talking about consciousness and sentience and similar themes, but kind of more from the perspective of an enslaved people and what that means in this like horrible world in which, people are retired after 4 years and there is this miracle. And okay, that kind of doesn't make sense, but it also kind of does because, as we've said, the only way to tell the difference between a human and a replicant is through the bone marrow. And so whether they've been programmed to be able to give birth, I mean, if that was something that Tyrell gave to Rachel, or if it's something, well, you've got all of the human parts, organs, blood, muscle, bone, everything of a human, then how are you stopping that being a natural development? I just think it's a fascinating thing. I think the idea that to some degree it becomes like the religious themes they don't really touch upon the religious themes in the original. But it's interesting that then you can have those religious themes of the miracle birth and what that means for a people. I think it's a fascinating story. I'm completely bought in by it.
I partly got caught up short a little bit by one of the odd things that it has in common with the first film, which is, again, this idea that some things are just illogical, and some of them are sort of probably leftovers from the first film in a way that they can't unsquare them. So you kind of just have the same problems of why do you make replicants so similar and then complain about them, as it were. I found the style a little bit studied. I will say up front, in terms of Villeneuve's work, my favourite of his films is Arrival, which I think is a wonderful film.
The film I love so much that I can't watch again because I'm not.
You don't want to spoil it. Yeah.
No, I'm not emotionally resilient. I watched it. I cried like a baby, and every now and again I'm like, I should watch it again. I'm like, I have to build myself up.
No, I feel the same way about things that are precious to me, books or films or whatever. I feel the same way. I don't, I have copies. Eventually I'll go there, but it's like 5-6 years could easily go by between my purchasing and actually want to. Okay, I'm prepared to go there again because I don't want to thin it out. It's a special thing.
I know mine's just purely. The ultimate question in that with the future, between Amy Adams' character and Jeremy Renner's character and their daughter. As a parent, I just cannot handle it. I literally will blub through it, and I'm like, maybe I should just watch it until that point or something because I can't handle the rest of it.
Oh no! But it's a wonderful film.
Oh, it's a beautiful film.
Well, look, if I was being a bit of an online jerk, I would probably refer to it as a bit of a replicant in and of itself of the original film. In a way, I think it's a bit too beholden to it, which I know is an odd thing to say about the sequel, but because they made the music sound like the original music, but it isn't, and because the look of it apes the look of the first film, but it isn't done the same way. It's digital, it's not film. Even the opticals are primarily digital, although they did use models. Again, though, you get out of a sense of fealty to the original one. And I thought that was a shame because there were so many very interesting ideas in it. The idea of Kay and his avatar. Yes, all right. Yeah.
And I didn't know which one to go with when I was saying. I was like, should I say Joe? Should I say Kay? But yes. I
go with Kay because it's Kafkaesque. And the relationship he has with Joy, I thought that's very interesting. As you say, very typical of the modern. I mean, I'm more likely to send someone a text now to say, is it okay to phone you? Rather than just ring someone out of the blue, right? So it's that sort of idea. Everything is at one stage removed. And obviously you get that complicated, you get another kind of complicated, unusual, let's call it that, sex scene, love scene in the film, where, because I've seen it described, of course, as a threesome, which it's not the way I would have described it, but it's unusual, and it's a scene that speaks to certain things. But again, it's discreet. It has massive build up. Then you don't see anything. You see, and it sort of just happens off screen, which I'm perfectly okay with. But in a way, it also has all kinds of extraneous bits. It's like the whole bit when he sort of goes to the orphanage, and it's a very long sequence, and he gets shot down, and these people just turn up, and you don't know if they just want bits of the spinner or whatever it is, and all of that. And I'm just thinking, in terms of the storyline, it doesn't take you anywhere. He could have just read something about it and had the flashback. It's almost like, because it's so prolonged, because of how long it is, how elaborate it is, how elaborated. And it's one of those things, you get the impression that this is kind of what happens with a film that's been in production maybe just a bit too long, is that you've got leftover bits. I mean, it's like the opening scene, right, is actually the opening scene from another draft of Blade Runner, the scene out in the farm, that was written for the first film. So it was actually great to see it being used. And like you say, the virgin birth idea, well, it's meant to be a miracle. Again, it makes you wonder what kind of science it is. But the core plot, the antagonist, I think, doesn't work. And this idea that if they can have their own children, then that makes a lot more sense in terms of dominating the universe. You're thinking, no, hang on, that makes no sense. Because what you're saying is you're going to wait 20 years for them to reach some kind of adulthood, whereas you display in the film that when you artificially create them, you create them fully grown. So you have to wait 5 whole minutes. And no, but I'd rather wait 20 years. That makes more sense.
The company will produce these replicants, but if the replicants can produce their own replicants, which are pretty much human at this point, but whatever, they are then not beholden to live out their lives in service to the humans. This is about slavery, right? This is about.
But that's what I mean, because in the film he wants them to reproduce, and I'm thinking that makes no sense. And it's not because he's trying to stop them reproducing. He's sort of saying, I can't make them fast enough, so I need them to reproduce so that I can have more slaves. And you're thinking, that makes literally no sense.
Yeah, I hate Jared Leto, so I try not to pay attention.
What, you mean him as a person? Has he been mean to you?
I think he's just like, they stick him in everything. I don't know what he's there for. Anyway, so yes, that part does not make sense. See, he had to come in. And
that's what I mean.
But I mean, from the point of view of the replicants, they are then like autonomous beings who can reproduce themselves, and they can then therefore make connections amongst themselves and make societies amongst themselves, and they don't have to rely on being produced somewhere.
Absolutely. And if the story had been about that, that would have been fine. But the threat is the exact opposite and makes no sense. I mean, it's like when you get the love character, which again seems to be...
What, Joy?
No, love. You know, the kind of the mean replicant who goes around killing people.
Yeah.
Which again, you almost. When I was watching it, I started thinking,
she's programmed.
Who's she working? Yes, I know she's not bad. She's just programmed that way, and it's kind of
just grab it.
Exactly. And it's sort of like, hang on, I'm not sure she's working for herself. Is she working for a boss? Because she sort of says, "Oh, I'll just have to lie to my boss about this." And I'm thinking, hang on. So they've got lousy security. Here we are in the LAPD, and they don't even have cameras, so they can't tell when she walks in and start killing off members of their staff. They're sort of incapable of dealing with it. And then she just basically turns into a Terminator, doesn't she? And it's kind of just dull. You know, you kind of lose. You know, the big water crash sequence towards the end of the film. I thought it's just a set piece. I didn't think it was particularly convincing. It felt like it belonged in a different movie. And then you get what is a very, shall we say, accelerated ending, because it's kind of like, now I don't know if that was because they wanted to replicate the kind of doors closed shut of the director's cut. This kind of, and now what happens, and you don't know, but literally it speeds up so fast towards the end that you've had this gigantic build up, and then it's this rather, to me, too fast. So this isn't to say that, I don't know if I'm right about this at all. I think it's, when I saw it, that's what I thought. I enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot in there that I liked. I like Ryan Gosling, although I'm not sure it's actually his best film. Again, it's one of these things. You get these early bits at the beginning where they're mean to him and they call him skin job and whatever, and you're thinking, how do you know? How can you tell? He looks exactly like me and you.
But that's the other replicant, so it's they probably, you know, will probably understand.
No. Well, surely no. I mean,
when he
goes to the LAPD and they get colleagues walk by and just say skin job, or they've written it on the front door of his flat. You know, they're kind of putting nasty things about him. It's kind of like, you're not a real person, we hate you, sort of thing. But it's kind of like, how do you know? You can't tell. He's Ryan Gosling. Surely everybody knows he's catnip to everybody. It's sort of, how can you be so mean to him? But also, literally, again, if he was blue, I'd understand. But
I assume that those things are just well known. Like if you're a Blade Runner in 2049 rather than in 2019, if you're a Blade Runner in 2049, I think by then all Blade Runners are going to be skin jobs. I shouldn't call them skin jobs. That's such a slur.
Yeah, you really
they're
shouldn't.
all going to be
so mean.
replicants. Yeah, but they're all going to be replicants. And so I assume that that's how they know, because
well, because they've got his CV. It's all the fault of social media, obviously.
Because he's a Blade Runner. That's what he does. He goes out and kills people like himself. And then where is he doing those little tests? Which test if he's still?
That's back when he goes back to the office. And again, that's...
Yeah, so then people will know that he's doing those and that he's a replicant.
What, where he lives?
People talk. People have always talked.
Again, I suppose what I'm getting at is that these are all interesting ideas, and
you don't like the way it was put together, basically.
I would like to have seen it. I would have liked to have seen it developed a bit more, because actually, if you're interested in the Joe K character, you want to actually spend a bit more time with him. And the problem is that he does, because unfortunately, of course, this is what Ryan Gosling is often accused of course, is being just a teensy-weensy bit blank quite often, and not having an enormous, obviously partly is the sense of humor is this kind of super deadpan approach in films where he's being funny. So it's almost like it's trading on that, because he they make jokes about it in the film, but he basically practically never shows emotion. So the one moment you see him getting truly angry is this, of course, what is, from a plot standpoint, incredibly contrived to the point of being ridiculous, which is that he happens to find the daughter just like that, except he's made a mistake. He gets super angry because he thinks he's the child. Spoiler alert, and he's not. But that's the one moment he gets to be all angry, because he's thinking, my life's sort of over, if you like. But he just happens to have found the right person who is the child in question that they're all looking for. And he's just found it because he went through a Rolodex and he thought, I'll go to that one. I wish they'd come up with a slightly better way.
No, I don't think that's why they found it. He found that because when he goes to I'm going to call her a Dreamweaver, and he finds out that because he's found the horse, which shows that his memory is not false, because it's a real horse that's at the place where his memory should be. Yeah. So when she confirms that it's a real memory, he's like, oh, it's your memory, because the best memories are hers. And that's why...
Well, she makes the best memory. She doesn't have the best memory.
She makes the best memories, but I think it's also implied that her memories are informing. Yeah, no, it is. I think her memories are informing the memories that she makes, and the best memories are actually her memories.
But she says the exact opposite. She says, well, no, I'm stuck in this room all day long. I don't go out. I don't have memories.
But she wasn't born in that room. She put that horse.
No, I know, but again, why do they even do that, right? Why does she have to be stuck in this room? And it's sort of bizarre because, and this is what I mean, it's kind of like, but equally, he only goes because he's told. Now, he could have. There could be 25 people who do these, who does. Also,
I mean, it's not realistic that there's one person.
It's not great detection, is it? He's not a great cop, is he? It's not like he showed enormous deductive reasoning to find the person that nobody else has been able to find for 20 years, and he just drives up to her front door and says, "Oh, hello."
But in theory, he's been programmed to do this. Know that he's been given those memories, and all the other crumbs is part of the. Is that not part of the plan of the resistance?
No.
I think it is. I think that's what I got from it. That and even that thing of where he believes it's him, because they switch the things and it's the male to the female when he's trying to do the, and one of the children dies, and then it's a shock when you're like, oh, the female lived it. It's not. It's that bit so embarrassing where like he's like, oh. It's not me. Like,
bummer.
Yeah, but it's also like, oh, I thought I was the chosen one. I thought I was the.
I'm not the savior.
I'm not the savior. And, yeah,
it's like the anti-life of Brian.
Yeah.
He's not the Messiah. He's just a naughty boy. Yeah.
Just a naughty Blade Runner. Yeah.
Well, but this is. I think perhaps it's because the pacing of the film is this kind of slow and deliberate. At least for me, because I'm not disagreeing with you. I think there's lots of good stuff there, and it's easy to tease.
That is the common thing that people think it's slow.
I did. I thought it was slow, and I have no problem with slow movies, films that are 4 hours long. Let's say that's fine. I mean, I sit in cinemas and watch 4-hour movies. I'm okay with that, as opposed to films where you can just pause and go make a cup of tea. But in this case, I suppose what I meant was it's rhythmically, in terms of the pace of the film. It suddenly felt like it made the ending seem rushed. I think when you get to Las Vegas, which I think visually is the big set piece, of course, because it looks different from everything else, and it's this amazing sort of ochre look, I guess, or it's this reddish ochre look, which does make you think of Mars, of course, which I thought was very interesting. The pace is nice and slow because you're exploring the environment and he's slowly getting there, and of course it's the build up because you're going to get to see Deckard. You know, after all, it's Harrison Ford. We get to see him 33 years later, and or whatever it was, and that's a big selling point of the film. So it's great because it's one of the few scenes, of course, where you get the two of them together. They only have basically 2.5 scenes together, so it's not very much.
It is. I mean, that's the thing. Again, when I think about those Vegas scenes, they are just phenomenal. You've got, you've got this kind of these fight scenes happening. You've got, you've got Elvis in these kind of like broken down visual. Oh, it's too fun to watch. And I am a very like visually inclined person. So for me, even if I could probably watch it without any dialogue all the way through because it's so visually stunning to me. And I think the Vegas scenes are phenomenal.
It's the best bit. I mean, by far. I think I loved it then. I thought it, when I rewatched it, I thought, no, this really holds up in ways that I think other parts of it feel a little bit wonky by comparison. But I don't mean to be overly critical at all. I was just fascinated that you now prefer it to the first one, not because
I don't think it can exist without the first one at all. And I think that's also a reason why I feel bad to kind of say, well, I prefer it, because without the first one, I probably wouldn't. Like, as in, it needs that. It needs to be anchored in that.
I think in a way it speaks to some of the things that we've been talking about, which is that Blade Runner, the 1982 film and its various variants, feels like a very open text in lots of ways. It does a remarkable job of world building. It creates an atmosphere and a place that you go into and you're drawn into, and it's messy in a good and bad way. Some bits don't quite work, some bits do, some bits you look at that thinking, oh, this is questionable, but I can believe it as a lived place. And that is rare, I think, in films quite often. They're as rarely, particularly science fiction films, I think ones that are as convincing about the new reality that they've created and as detailed. I think you applaud that. And so going back there, it was a genuine pleasure. I wonder if I doubt I'll live that long, but how will I feel in 30 years' time if I go back to watch Blade Runner 2049, by which point there will have course been Blade Runner 2099 or whatever.
Well, the series is coming out soon.
That is actually happening, right? Is it happening?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so that's going to be intriguing, although it's a bit like the James Bond thing. You just keep thinking, well, there's going to be a new film. There's going to be millions of offshoots probably now that the reins have changed owner. And you keep thinking, oh, what's that going to be like? And thinking, well, in a way, that lasted for 60 plus years, and it has this unusual place in movie history. So, and there it is. And then there's going to be everything else. I think Blade Runner 1982, the fact that it keeps being reshaped and rethought and re-engaged with, is a huge sign of success. And I think I totally celebrate that. And it's also a great film noir. So I'm really happy that you picked that as a text for us to examine. So thank you very much for bringing that up as our conversation point today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show and offering me an array of science fiction leaning noirs, or noir leaning science fiction.
So who do you prefer, though? Be honest, Harrison Ford or Ryan Gosling?
Are we taking out the rape scene?
Do we have to call it that? It's just so disheartening.
It is so disheartening. So we ignore that because that's the only way we can function as Blade Runner fans. Then I obviously, aside from that, I prefer Deckard. He feels like a more noir kind of hero. Like he's kind of reluctant and cynical and yeah.
The typical flat-footed stuff on Wikipedia, where there's a footnote to say, oh no, the writer of Blade Runner 2049 has confirmed that Kay dies at the end. I was kind of thinking, this wasn't clear. That's one ambiguity that I did not have.
But also, it's like the sacrifice. It's interesting how many people, for me, okay, you have the intention and I am interested in that, but for me, it's always the interpretation, the multiple interpretations of how we read something that makes it interesting. I want to hear different people, how it affected them and how it brought out themes that perhaps the writers did not intend.
Tell you what, it was really great when they interviewed Villeneuve, who said that there was an initial 4-hour cut version of 2049, and he immediately said, but I'm never going to show that to anybody. So it's kind of like, forget it. It isn't going to be like Blade Runner. There aren't going to be multiple iterations across the decades.
It's funny, though, because with Villeneuve's movies, I like his visual style so much that my ongoing joke is that man could film a shoe and I would go and watch it in the cinema for 3 hours. That's how much I like watching his films.
Yeah, well, on that note, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast, Ayesha. And, I hope we get to do this again really, really soon.
Just before I leave, I wanted to add a post I found on Threads on social media by a user called Brain Labour, which he said, thought-provoking science fiction recipe. 90 minutes asking, do robots have feelings? 30 minutes explaining, all we know is the humans do not. And I think that sums up Blade Runner really well.
Well, it sums me up, I tell you. Yeah, I'm on board with that.
I'm a sucker for those. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners, and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix. And it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.